We all know there's a world within and there's a world outside. The Theosophical Society is one of the organizations that has since actually more than a century worked on the inside. We're speaking today with Radha Burnier. She is the president, the worldwide president of this Theosophical Society, and she's in Amsterdam. Radha, welcome. Reading the material from the Theosophical Society, my first encounter was really the Patanjali Sutras. And the first one I really didn't understand so easy, but after a while I understood that it meant, in modern terms, to learn to stop the machine. Yoga is to learn to stop the machine. This thing that is inside, that makes judgments, thinks, we have to calm it down. Did I understand correctly?
Yes, it is to stop this machine which goes on automatically, but it is also essentially a harmonization of everything which is within. The word yoga has been translated in a variety of ways, but I think the best term to use in connection with what happens when yoga is practiced is harmony. There are so many elements within the human mind which are contradictory, and therefore the average human being feels a lot of tension, often attributes the tension to things outside. But it's really due to a lack of harmony within. And it is said that a real yogi is someone who is always in a state of harmony, whatever happens outside. He doesn't wait for something to suit himself to turn up in life before he can feel contented and happy.
Okay, now yoga is only one of the inspirations of the Theosophical Society, which is, in fact, it's not a religion, but it is about religion.
Yes, it's not a religion because there is no church, there are no authorities, there are no dogmas to follow. Everybody is free to inquire into the nature of life, find out its meaning. But there is a lot of theosophical literature which is available to help the person. None of it is meant to be taken as a form of belief, but to be a background from which a person can start an inquiry into his own life and into life in general. But the Theosophical Society is also a response to the need of the world. It was said in the very early years of the society that humanity is like a body in which the limbs are at war with each other, so it's never healthy. This has gone on for centuries, perhaps for millennia, and we have to find out, especially now when there are so many dangers in the world, how to bring about a state of real understanding and mutual cooperation. So there must be some kind of a philosophy which everybody can realize, because nobody acts without some philosophy in the background of his mind. Even the materialist has a philosophy.
What's the difference between philosophy and theosophy? I mean, the word philos means friend and sophia means the wisdom. Theos means God. Sophia against wisdom. Wisdom about God, wisdom about friends of wisdom. What's the difference between philosophy and theosophy?
Theosophy means really divine wisdom. A wisdom, let us say, such as the gods may have, if we presume there are gods. Philosophy is the love of that wisdom. So one refers to the wisdom which enables a person to understand life, and the other refers to a way of life which will bring one to that wisdom, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now God comes in there. God, religion, for most people in this society, God is something they want to forget about. It was the church, it was something that suppressed them, that had judgments, dogmas. And here it comes up as something to be loved.
Well, the word God, is terribly misconstrued. It has done a tremendous amount of harm in the world. You are God and my God, and so we fight and all that sort of thing. But from a theosophical point of view, God is not anything anthropomorphic. So you can't attribute human feelings to all that. We may say that
it is a little bit hard. Anthropomorphic means you cannot say God is like a father, because a father is a human concept. You cannot say he is like a friend.
Well,
he's more than that.
In most religions, God is made in the model of man. So God always has a form, and that is a human form. He reacts like a human being does, with the peculiar love of adulation, and he punishes people who don't obey him, and all that sort of thing, which is rather childish. Voltaire said God made man in his own image, and ever since man has been returning the compliment. It is really, in fact, something like that. But from the theosophical point of view, we say all life is sacred. And life is much more than what we see with our senses. Obviously, the range of our senses is very small. And even the mind of the human being, as it is functioning now, has serious limitations. And if one could widen one's perceptions and be able to penetrate into an area which is now invisible, intangible, then perhaps we will respond to something sacred which is everywhere, immanent and transcendent, and that would be God. But it's not something which can be described in words or put into a form. It's too great for that.
But that's exactly what people do in the old days. People might meet with this outer reality, this wider reality in the form of visions or mystical experience. They would call it God, or encounters with holy people or saints, angels. And now maybe they say we see UFOs.
But that is because the brain gets conditioned. See, so if the Christian says he sees God, he sees it in the Christian form. The Hindu sees Krishna or Rama. And why doesn't it ever happen the other way around? Because it all comes through a conditioned brain. Even if there is some kind of a profound experience, it's often converted into something that the brain already knows. That is why in yoga it is said that you must free the mind completely of its conditioning.
Stop the machine.
Stop the machine.
Yeah. But so you see what these days UFOs are all over the place. People are afraid of contact with the other. Do you think it's the same as what people saw thousands of years ago?
Well, UFOs are trivial compared to what people have spoken about as the ultimate reality. I think that is an experience which is really ineffable. You can't find words for that. Perhaps people who have experienced even minor expansions of consciousness, and there are many accounts of all that. People like Tennyson and Shelley and so on.
Poets, the writers.
Poets, yes. People have felt that. They have all realized that it can't be put into words, this experience. In fact, the greatest experiences of life cannot really be expressed in words. Mm-hmm. Even if you love somebody, your wife or child or somebody, with all your heart, you can't really convey it in words, because whatever you say will be interpreted by the other person according to his level of experience.
I've read a little bit of your work. One of the books is called Human Regeneration. And what I see there, that in fact you say, yeah, well, knowledge is fine, but it's not what we're really trying to get. We're trying to get wisdom.
Yes.
And if wisdom is only words again and knowing the perennial wisdom from others, it's still not wisdom. We have to go really inside and calm down our brain, our judgment, our...
You see what is happening in the world today. There is tremendous knowledge. The knowledge is increasing all the time in every field. You know genes as well as the galaxies. You know more about Mars and whatnot. But people are very foolish in spite of that knowledge. There's no understanding of relationship. How should we relate ourselves to other human beings, to the plants, to the earth, to the elements? Wisdom consists in relating oneself, being able to act rightly so that there is a goodness which comes into everything, into the whole, not a personal benefit. So knowledge doesn't necessarily bring about that kind of wisdom. Wisdom is essentially love in action, we can say. Not human love, but a love which is universal, which is a pure giving, which can go out to everybody. And to some extent that is reflected in the first object of the Theosophical Society, you know, which is universal brotherhood, not towards some people belonging to one particular race or one class or anything like that.
Remark, I read it and I thought this must have been written a century ago, because now we would never say brotherhood.
Brotherhood, I know. But there is no real word with which you can substitute brotherhood. We have tried to look for a word, but there is nothing which means exactly the same, unfortunately.
Well, we use sometimes the word otherhood, but that's artificial construction. But so universal brotherhood, that's one of the goals, and the Theosophical Society has tried to reach that by not a very strict organization, I understand, a loose organization of people willing to do the work.
Yes, that's true. The organization is not too important. For instance, there is nothing in the constitution of the society or in the rules of any of the national groups within the society which would compel all to remain together. They are all more or less autonomous, and they could break up anytime they want to. But it is the feeling that we are all part of one family working for this change of attitude, which will mean universality, which keeps us together. And universality, even if you drop the word brotherhood, I think is very important.
Does it relate to wholeness in that sense? Or?
Yes, it's an understanding of the wholeness of life. But it has to be put into practice at every moment. When I meet you, you are Dutch, I am Indian, your background is different. But can I feel the same friendship, same sort of mutual connection as I would with somebody who belongs to my culture and speaks my language? I think universality has to transcend all these small, unimportant things.
No separation.
No separation.
Coming back to that knowledge and wisdom, it feels as if you're saying knowledge might separate people. Books might separate.
Knowledge does. Religious knowledge, for instance, is often used to separate people. But that is not the real
wisdom.
Yes.
So wisdom connects, and knowledge might separate.
Wisdom, I think, unifies, make people grow in real love which is universal, while knowledge can separate. And knowledge is of different kinds, not only knowledge of geography or science or biology, but for instance, knowledge of who I am. I think I am this, that and the other. and I think somebody else is something else. This is also a form of knowledge which separates.
It's a judgment.
It's a judgment.
Now, we have a fascination in this latter part of the 20th century about knowing. And I think the best example of that is the internet. We have built a global library with 150 million pages. And do you see that as something that could unite us or separate us?
Everything depends on the human mind. You know, all these technologies can be helpful and they can also be destructive. Ultimately, you come back to the human consciousness, the human mind, because you see already that internet is bringing people closer, but it's also becoming a means for
tool in the war
yes.
of between nations to say I'm better than you are because I have more internet. And
not only that, it can spread hatred as well as friendship. It can be a tool for pornography, all sorts of things. So
that brings me to morality. Morality in the view of the Theosophical Society is something that comes from within. But we have to have rules, don't we?
I think
pornography is one, not eating meat is another one. Living the right life is a rule.
Of course, rules are necessary because it takes so long for people to understand that selfishness is most destructive.
Is that true? Because that's one way. From the books I understand that a certain amount of discipline makes to help grow the fruit, but the day it comes off the tree because it's ripe has nothing to do with that training. And this seems to be an old discussion within the Theosophical Society between Krishnamurti, who said you don't have to do anything, you don't follow any teachers, any rules, it's you. And then there is this whole construction of people following courses, going to seminars.
Well, the tree may drop off in an instant, the fruit I mean, sorry, but the fruit has to ripen before it can drop off, and to ripen it requires certain influences. So if one were to take Krishnamurti literally, one shouldn't read his books either, or follow certain things that he spoke about, like observing life, like listening to the message of life, like learning about life. All that is also part of the way of life which makes the mind grow into maturity, like the ripening of the fruit.
Yeah, but I'm attracted to his idea. If you see a farmer in the field who has never even read anything, or a child, I can feel them being closer to God than me having read all this stuff, and many languages, many books have only separated me from feeling the field, or like a child, looking around and have the sense of wonder.
Well, that's a kind of idealized portrait of the farmer. It is true that people who live close to nature have a certain sense of harmony with nature, but after all, people who have lived this kind of simple, primitive life have also done terrible things, and it is they who have formed themselves into tribes, and they practice very bizarre things at times. One can't deny all that. I think one can't go back to that kind of simplicity, but by understanding what is happening in this highly sophisticated, complex, mechanized life, one has to come to a new kind of simplicity, both in one's way of living and within in the mind.
Yeah, but for me, for the average Dutch person says, yes, but wait a moment, if I join this Theosophical Society, I have to follow rules, and they seem very logical, not eat meat, be friendly to people, have good thoughts. You can find these things in Buddha's teachings, right work, right thinking, right speaking. Fine, but I don't want that. I want to watch television, I want to go out, drink beer, use drugs. Why would I follow these do-gooders, these nice people, nice books, it's all very nice. Why would I follow that? What does it bring me?
Well, the Theosophical Society doesn't tell people they shouldn't eat meat or drink alcohol or have a good time at all. In fact, it stresses the element of freedom. Everyone who joins the society is completely free, provided he or she accepts the principle of universality, of the unity of life on which it is based. But we say, look for the meaning and the purpose of life, but follow your own way to finding that truth. And therefore we can say the two pillars of the society are one, universal brotherhood, and the other is freedom of search, freedom of expression, freedom of inquiry. And most members have voluntarily come to feel that they don't want to injure much more than they can avoid. Therefore, they've become vegetarians, not because they are told to do so. They feel...
In general, I feel they like to live a gentle life.
Yes,
towards
that's
others,
right.
Towards animals, towards the world.
Non-injury. Because life is sacred, life is wonderful. Even if you take a small insect, and you know, people have looked into the wings of a fly, or even right into the structure of a piece of rock, and it's really a marvel. And when you think about how life functions, how a little seed can grow, how it fashions itself according to some natural design which has been given. All this is so wonderful. You begin to see the marvel and a quality which I can't call anything other than holy or sacred. And if you feel like that, your attitude towards life is very gentle, respectful. You can come to it naturally, not being told that you have to do it. Of course, we have to have rules, I think, which prevent cruelty to human beings as well as to other forms of life. You see what terrible things are happening today in the world, how we treat animals, how they are transported, so many things like that. And there has to be a restriction on this kind of violence. But at the same time, no police force, no law can change the world unless people change within themselves. That's what we mean by regeneration.
Working on the inside, you say if we change ourselves inside, the world will follow, because it's a reflection. Now there are people who say, yeah, but suppose we change the outside. We make a monastery and it's very holy and quiet up in the mountains, and we put a strict regime there, people eat very healthy, then from the outside the inside will change. That's possible too.
To some extent, but the mind is much more powerful than the body. Of course, the two have to go hand in hand. But for centuries or millennia, people have been trying to change the outside. You know, the political system, the economic system. And is the world better? That's because the mind doesn't change.
That's what I want. One of the things is that you, although the Theosophical Society admires the work of Jesus, of Buddha, of many people, I find that suffering is a basic thing. You think the world, people are suffering. You have to end the suffering, we have to do something about the suffering. Now one could look at the world with a different view and say the world is perfect. This suffering is a necessary condition. But one could see the world as a little bit more perfect than that we need human regeneration. One could say humans are okay.
The world of nature is perfect, I think. But the human world, human society is far from perfect. It's full of suffering. And that's of our own making. Therefore, if we change ourselves, we can reduce the suffering, perhaps end it altogether. Mm-hmm. Why shouldn't this world be a world of peace? Why should we be constantly fighting? nations, within families, husband and wife, older generation with younger generation, if there were greater understanding and greater respect.
That's true, Radha. But on the other hand, when I pick up the Bhagavad Gita, which is an inspiration to your society too, it's all about war, people fighting. And what I get out of it is that there is some honor and some necessity of fighting.
Well, the Bhagavad Gita has been described by people who really understand as not referring to an actual war, but to the battle which has been to be fought inside. You spoke about stopping this machine which goes on. The machine is what we are familiar with. And the cousins, the uncles, the teachers that Arjuna refused to fight with because he was so familiar with them are the patterns of thought which exist in our own mind, the conditioning which is there, which has become so familiar. For instance, most human beings are conditioned to retaliate. This is what is happening in Ireland, in Palestine, everywhere. We do that automatically, like two animals which are fighting for their territory sit nose to nose and growl at each other.
That is written in, say, the Jewish faith, an eye for an eye.
Yes.
Isn't that a basic thing of nature?
Well, it may be true at the level of biological evolution, but I don't think the human being is meant to remain at that level. If so, he would be just a glorified animal with a very brain capacity which is much larger than that of animals. Mm-hmm. But there is something more in the human consciousness which responds to beauty, which is in quest of truth, which has moral aspiration and so on. That itself proves that the human being is not to remain at that level. And what is great human culture when it's only when the mind is able to move into this other area, which is not just fighting and reacting mechanistically. Mm-hmm. And scientists say, take for instance the interest in beauty, that there is no evolutionary need from the biological point of view for beauty, for truth. So why is the human mind concerned with this at all?
We seem to be always trying to... I think beauty is a way of connecting. If we love something, we connect. We have less separation. Less separation means a more healthy situation. I think beauty has a function in life.
Well, it seems as if all the time in the evolutionary process, slowly, perhaps too slowly, things are moving to higher levels. Now, I think beauty, truth, goodness, the three great attributes of reality according to Plato and according to the Hindus, these are all represent that higher level of consciousness that is open to the human being. It will come. I am certain about that.
You're very positive. Mm-hmm. Now, the Theosophical Society started with Madame Blavatsky and many people, Dr. Besant, many people worked with it. Yet there is a feeling that these people were doing what you would call esoteric but also dark work. They were experimenting with forces, with magic, with knowledge that is dangerous. How do you see that?
I think that is a complete misunderstanding. There is no such thing as magic, because the more one understands of nature's laws and the forces at work in nature, the more capable one is of doing certain things. 200 years ago, if you turned on a switch and music came from nowhere, people would have said, you're doing magic. Maybe
you are we burn you.
Yes, burn you. Now you simply say it's a radio.
Mm-hmm.
So there is always an advance like this into nature's workings. All that one can say is a person like Blavatsky knew much more about nature's forces than ordinary people did. But she used to demonstrate some of this only to convince people that there are vast areas, mysteries of nature, which have yet to be understood. And since then, many scientists have also realized that what they don't know is much vaster than what they actually know. But her main point, the main point of starting the Theosophical Society was not for all this magic and so on. And certainly none of them did anything dark or evil. Annie Besant was known for her great sacrifices for the sake of bringing about reforms in the social, educational, political, and other fields. She was a very wise and selfless woman.
Yeah, but so probably was Jeanne d'Arc in the Middle Ages, but she got burned on the stakes. So probably were the Cathars who had a way of perfect living, and yet the church in those days wiped them out. People like Tim Leary, the people who explored the realm of the mind with psychedelics. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they were seen as dangerous, even today. So
everybody who moves ahead a little bit is in danger because the vast masses of humanity don't like to see reform or change. There are always forces of resistance, don't you think so?
Yeah, but I'm not the president of the of the Theosophical Society. You personally must struggle with this image of the society that is seen by some as a dark force, by others as a way to God, to wisdom. It's your task to guide this image, isn't it?
Yes, we try, of course, all the time to dissolve these ideas that people have about the society being very strange. We are not a sect, we are not a religion. We are only concerned with how to understand life and its significance and to bring about better relationships in the world between all the different human beings and also with the whole earth. And so in a way we are pioneers in ecology, if you like to put it that way, because
but now let's take a person like Mahatma Gandhi, who had similar ideas, but at one time he stood up and said, hey, let's make India free from the English. He took his inside awareness to the outside world, and he became a political leader.
Yeah.
That's different from what you do.
No, a lot of members of the Theosophical Society have worked in all these fields. You know, Annie Besant pioneered home rule for India before Gandhi landed on India's shores. And she was the first woman president of the Indian National Congress, a great honor. And she is even today revered in India as practically like the great Indian citizen, because she worked so much for the country. So it's not that Theosophists haven't done it, and we have a theosophical order of service and encourage people to help all those who are in need, the poverty-stricken, refugees, etc. So we are not always living in the clouds. Wisdom, the word wisdom itself indicates that whatever we understand must be translated into action. The right kind of action which will bring about greater peace, unity, etc. So
you personally have been since 1980 you've been the president of the Theosophical. How do you feel about it? Is it a burden? Is it a joy? Is it an honor?
No, it is a privilege. I have done various other things, and I was the director of a very well-known Indological library. I was a little bit in the academic world. I've been in the world of art, I was practicing Indian classical dancing, and I appeared in one of the films of Jean Renoir, The River. And I've been interested in the environment movement and in the education of the underprivileged and all sorts of things. But behind it all was my interest in the fundamental questions of life. How is the world to be better? How is the human being to be free of sorrow, to stop being so cruel? Is there a greater destiny for the human being? Have we really come to the top of the whole evolutionary ladder, or can the human being grow into a different condition? You know, many religions have spoken about these saints, the holy ones, the perfected ones, and is that possibility open? That's all part of yoga, to release something which is still potential within the human heart and mind. All these questions have interested me tremendously from the age of 14. So it is certainly not a burden for me to do the work. It's what I really want to do.
Did you have a mystical experience? You say at the age of 14, something happened in your life that...
No, I have had some experiences which may be called mystical, but not necessarily at the age of 14. At the age of 14, I started reading theosophical books and became interested in the whole approach of theosophy. Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the stories is that the fruit has to ripen by studying and practicing and stuff like that. But at one time, the fruit has to come off the tree.
Yeah.
Do you feel that happened in your life, that you have reached a state where you say...
No, I think to claim that one has reached that state and to say I am enlightened and all that is a piece of folly. But I don't feel I've come to that. There is a long way to go. And I think to be aware of where one's limitations are is very important, and not allow egoism to overtake one.
That's true. Radha, thank you for your sharing. This was Radha Burnier, the president of the Theosophical Society, and we were in Amsterdam, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.